All right, we're going to call meeting to order. This is the April board meeting. Welcome, everybody. Glad you found it. I went to every entrance till this one. So.
As did I. Nice tour of the landscaping.
Like,
Yep.
no.
It's like Hotel California.
Did y'all see me walking by? You just texted me, turn around.
We just were waiting on
Let you go.
We were
Let me
taking
walk
minutes.
around.
I did, but retaining is maybe, I read them, but I did not remember.
From one engineer to another. Come on, Larry.
Okay, first off, I do want to give condolences to the county staff. I realize it's been a difficult few weeks with the passing of Commissioner Hayes and now Mr. Burgess. So on behalf of the organization, condolences to all of the county staff from CFPUA. Okay, determination of a quorum. We need to excuse Mr. Porter, Commissioner Barfield. Mr. Briggs will be here. We just need to excuse him until he gets here.
So moved.
Second.
Right. Okay. All right. Motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
All right.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Dr. Cannon, the minutes.
The minutes from our last meeting are contained in your packet, and if there is any discussion, otherwise we'll take a motion to adopt those.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And we also need to approve the minutes from the CIP work session on May 8th.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I don't think we had anybody signed up for public comments. All right, moving on to the consent agenda.
Could I ask that we pull items 1 and 2 for further discussion?
Okay. Any comments on 3, 4, 5, and 6? Motion to approve 3, 4, 5, and 6.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Item number 1 on the consent agenda is the employee drug and alcohol policy.
Yeah. I think this discussion would be better had at the end of the HR committee report where we talk about workforce development and items that we're having issues with retaining staff. And we're talking about some significant increases across the board to pay while also cutting our workforce potentially. I just don't understand quite the need for a complete overhaul unless there's some issues at staff level for a complete overhaul of the drug policy. It certainly makes sense for folks who are, with safety issues, things like that, but why are we doing it?
I'll ask our HR director to come to the podium, and I'll give you my summary of the employee drug and alcohol policy application. The primary driver for bringing this set of changes forward was feedback that we received from our biannual all-supervisor meeting. We've started having meetings every 6 months with every person that has a role in supervision here at the organization. Frontline supervisors expressed their concern that there were individuals in the organization that were not covered by the random drug testing policy, me and others. Then they felt it was a fairness and equity issue. And after reviewing it, the management team agreed. So the proposed modification intends to bring in everybody who has not been part of the random drug testing so that we are equitably applying this new testing policy.
Will there be an increase in cost or increase amount of drug testings throughout the year?
I'll defer to Lori.
Yeah, sure. So the current random drug screen is a quarterly random drug screen, and so currently we have about 2/3 of our workforce that are in that pool.
Okay.
So there are 2 different types of random drug screen that we complete. We complete one pool that's in what we consider a safety sensitive position. But there's also a pool that has CDL requirements that are like DOT rates. It's a little bit different. So that 1/3 of the workforce that is not currently will go into that safety sensitive pool. So it won't change the number of drug screens. It'll just make that random pool larger.
Organization-wide.
I read over this and saw the strikeouts and what have you. Just want to be clear on something. If someone's number, I know don't want to compare it because it's not fair to do it, but at the city level, with civil service protected employees, the fire and the police, if their number comes up and they feel that they're going to test positive, they can voluntarily admit so, I don't know if that's the correct way of putting it, and go into a treatment. And they wouldn't be fired or wouldn't have to be dismissed. And when we hire people, when we look at their background, if they've had a violation of, not manufacturing, distribution, or whatever, but something of a minor issue, does that go against is that a black mark on their being able to be brought into employment?
And so we do have a criteria that we utilize for pre-employment background screening to determine whether or not someone passes their background check. And so it depends on the type of conviction, the length of time of the conviction since, like how long ago the conviction was, and if there were other things on their background. So we do utilize criteria so that we're consistent across the organization when we're making those decisions.
And to follow up on the random, our policy towards a one-time recovery. Would you like to describe that?
Sure, so a couple of things about that. An employee can at any point come forward and indicate a need for assistance. And at that point, we have a process that we utilize to support that employee in getting rehabilitation and to try to get them back to work and successful.
I understand that, now that's good, but I'm talking about like the day that their number comes up and they're told they need to go to the
Right, so
test.
at that point, at the day that they are notified that they need a drug screen, they cannot come forward at that moment. They have to come forward prior to that. If they have a positive drug screen at that point, then we do have the opportunity for what we call a last chance agreement. So depending on, again, the background, the standing of the employee, what the positive screen is, we may be able to offer them a last chance opportunity in which they would go through a substance abuse, counseling, rehabilitation, and potentially return to work.
Okay, so they wouldn't automatically be terminated.
Not necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
And that was a recent change made by this board.
Right.
Thank you.
Here's my main concern. We have some really intelligent, bright people, throughout the organization. If they like smoke some weed on the weekends and they get popped, for lack of a better word, then they're gone. No?
No, because we have a last chance program. Now, that used to be true. That used to be true, but we do have a last chance program.
Okay.
That issue came up with the chief. I was on the Civil Service Commission, and they were having trouble with recruitment because when they would look back at their background, like 18 or 19 years old, they had a violation for possession of marijuana or other such stuff. And the city had a zero tolerance policy, and that drifted back to hiring practices, and we diluted that a bit to help, because the kid got caught doing something, he's 18, 19 years old, he's 26 now, he's been in the military, he's been to college. It should be expunged in our thinking.
Right.
I just want
And
to make
depending
sure.
on what it is, we're generally looking about 7 years. But
Okay.
if it's something very significant, we could look further than that. But for us, on average, for some of those like what you're talking about, misdemeanors like that, we're looking 7 years.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, the only other point I want to raise, we talked about this before, but, we're reaching that point where it's perfectly legal in, I think, the District of Columbia, I don't know what other nearby states, we're going to have employees that travel. So this is obviously something we need to kind of stay on top of, and just in fairness and in keeping up with the times.
Here, here.
Agreed. And our first, putting our toe in that water was to move away from a zero tolerance policy.
Exactly, thank
And
you.
as these issues evolve in local government in particular, we'll be looking to our partner organizations, the city and county, for some guidance. This will be a continuing, evolving issue.
There are quite a few things in legislation that we're watching. So for us, it's always about walking the line between doing what's right and fair for employees, but also ensuring that our employees are safe and our citizens are safe. So it's always kind of, watching both of those things, making decisions for that.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, if we're finished with that discussion, I was just a little slow this morning. Number 6 on the consent agenda, I just had a quick question. I would like to bring that forward.
Okay, let's, so are we good with number 1?
Good, thank you.
Can we now vote?
Yes.
Take a motion to vote on number 1?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Commissioner Zapple, your question on number 6.
Thank you. This is the 2023 Customer Satisfaction Survey. The question is, have we road tested this at all? My concern is it's a lot of information and frankly fairly dense. And I know that part of what we're trying to do is reach out to some of the lower income families to try and get a read on how well we're doing or what we are missing. I'm not sure, just by some of the sentence construction here, you've got to, I think it would be difficult for somebody who's not really proficient in reading and writing.
I'm not filling that out.
Well, yeah.
There's one particular graph where you're supposed to rank everything.
Yes, it's, and then just some of the words are difficult words, that's all. And so I'm just wondering, Ron, have we road tested it, or?
So most of these questions are actually adapted from surveys that have been administered already by our vendor. They've administered, I would guess, in the hundreds of these surveys. But if there are particular questions that we have problems with, I think we have an opportunity now, since it hasn't been administered, maybe to do some changes if there are changes we think need to be made.
All right. If I had to make an overall thought, is to simplify it. I mean, I think it's great that we're doing it and we're reaching out, but the very people I think we want to be hearing from are, as Luke just said, I'm not filling that out.
You do know, Rob, there's a chance to win $500 if you fill it out.
Never mind, I'm filling it.
I missed that part. Jessica.
That
but-
was one of the ways we talked about addressing the hurdle to get people to want to fill it out.
Even still, new granulated activated carbon, maybe I have trouble saying it. There's people out there who have no clue what we're talking about.
Right.
In there, we do, and I think a lot of people do, but again, I just, if I get this in the mail, and I have any difficulty in reading, there's no way I'm going to answer it. So I don't know what the solution is, rather than, going door to door, or to find some way to simplify it. If we really want to get that information,
Sure.
I think there's
I
a
think
better way to do it, yeah.
Yeah. So I think what we're trying to do, there's a lot of information that I think we want together, correct?
Mhm.
And then there's the way we're going to do it, in a way that our vendor is going to do it, is they're going to mail it out, and then they will offer a way for it to be filled out online as well. And then there are options as well for people who speak Spanish to call that number, and then they can receive a way for them to do it as well. But in terms of simplification, I think maybe you can meet with some of you offline.
As a alternative, of course, we've structured this and priced this in such a way as to try to gather as much information through a particular set of channels. The challenge you raise can be handled through either simplification, which means we may lose some resolutional data, or to take in this information through these channels and then supplement them from other channels, such as door-to-door or call surveys. And there's two ways to approach that. Since we're trying to be mindful of the funding that we spend, maybe a way to approach this is look and see if there's any additional steps, simplification our vendor recommends without losing resolution. And then run through these channels, which is mailing and online. And if we don't get a sufficient amount of information from the demographics that we're looking for, or all the demographics we're looking for, then we come back to you as staff and suggest that we need to open some additional channels, i.e. door-to-door or phone call.
How about this? We're paying these guys a bunch of money. They're out in Kansas. If we tell them we want a survey that will be geared towards somebody with a, elementary school, understanding of, reading and writing, I'd be really interested. I mean, these guys, you're right, Vaughn, I know this is sounding sarcastic, but it's not meant to be. These guys have done this for a long time. I am sure they're not the first, I'm not the first person to kind of bring this issue up. What would it look like if we had somebody who had just a basic understanding, of English, of writing and reading? Could we do that and just make that request of them?
Of course.
I can certainly make that request. The only thing I would say is I think that's, if we're talking about truly talking about an elementary level school understanding of reading and writing, I think that's probably going to be quite the challenge for somebody to do to get the information that we're seeking. And I don't disagree with you at all.
Yeah.
I think that is an issue in general with any population.
Well, maybe there's a balance where some of the questions can be geared that way. And if they're technical, then they're just gonna skip over it, hopefully. Or hopefully, but I think there is we do want to get some level of understanding of these more, weighty issues.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's just a combination.
And just to speak to your specific question about granite or activated carbon, one of the reasons for that question in particular is really to see if people have actually been exposed to our messaging. And so if they've been exposed to our messaging, I think theoretically they would say, oh yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The most successful magazine on record, the Reader's Digest, was aimed at a 7th grade education.
Typically, 6th, 8th, 6th, 7th, or 8th. The New York Times written to a 12th grade education. So if there are concerns that this is too weighty, closer to 12 than 6, we can go back and talk to the consultant. Just be aware that the lower level that we set it, the more likely is that we lose resolution that we want to learn. And in the industry, the way to overcome that is to use multiple channels. We selected this one channel because it's the most cost effective.
I hear that, but Hollis, I hear you. Let me just make one more point, and then I'll turn the floor over. We're in a unique situation that we're providing water and, an essential service, and everybody has it. I know from my own experience, and I think many people here have worked in some of the other trades. I often have subcontractors that work for me that are illiterate. Yet they work, they pay their taxes, they function great, and they do great work on top of it all. But you wouldn't know it until I ask for a handwritten invoice, and they turn it back over to me, and they kind of mumble something about not having the time, etc. It happens a lot. Deans, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And those are some of the people we're trying to reach that have, up until now, have not had a voice in really understanding some of that. So that's what I'm after, and I think we should go back and ask them for the 6th, 7th, 8th grade reading. I think it would help fill out part of what our purpose is for the whole thing. I'm sorry, Hollis, I just want to make that statement.
Vaughn and I went back and forth with this, and I read it, and I kind of feel the same way you guys do as far as the perplexity of the survey. But I think we need to start somewhere. And then we also have resources like Tommy Gunn, Brandon Hickman, Big B, that can actually make this into a contest of some sort. And let's come at it with a media blitz saying like, $500 chance to win, blah, 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 fill out the survey. And then those same illiterate people that you're talking about listen to the radio. You understand me? So then they'll get a chance to now know that there's a survey coming, $500 chance of winning something, and they might attempt to fill out as much as they can. Now, I mean, you're right, the plant, the Sweeney plant, and what we did to it, I try to explain that to people every day. Because people are always asking me about it because they know I'm on the water authority. Then I try to explain it to them at sixth grade level. So I think we should give this survey a chance. Let's see what we can decipher from it. Are we gonna, I mean, the information that we're trying to gather, I think we can get 60% of it with this with the survey. And let's just see where we come to with that, and then we can do immediate blitz and push the other 40%. That's my thought, you know, because we have resources that nobody else has with those guys on the radio and with Francis, and we can just turn it into a game of some sort, and that's what sixth graders like, right? Games, right? So we just turn it into a game, and let's push the thing forward, and let's see what we get from it. Because we keep spinning our wheels in the dirt, we'll never get the survey, and we'll never get the information, none of it that we're trying to get. That's my thought.
Okay. Or we vote, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, just, could you do it in 2 parts and just have one part that was general information and less complicated, and then in hopes of getting a much higher participation rate in that part, and then maybe separate out the more complicated issues. And of course, we don't want to stipulate part 1 is for folks with less education than part 2, but I think if it's all mixed in there together, then folks may look at it and say, okay, this is too much for me. And it's not just necessarily based on education level, but available time and wanting to put effort into it. So maybe if we had some important topics that weren't so complicated and we wanted a lot of feedback, maybe we could put those in one section and then say, okay, please fill this out, and if you have time, we'd like you to look at section 2.
That's an interesting option, but I would have to discuss that with our vendor and see whether that changes the cost structure at all. Because I would imagine then there's a different level or amount of analysis that goes into the results. Because you may be talking about, and probably are, talking about 2 different populations that are responding. But I think that's an interesting idea.
All right.
Okay, so since we already approved it, but I think there's some discussion, so based on,
Since I voted for it, I'll bring it back out.
okay, for
Yes,
reconsideration?
ma'am.
Okay,
I didn't make, I don't think I made the motion, but I
that's
voted
okay, you
for
can
it.
make
But
the
you
motion
voted
for
for it.
reconsideration.
Yeah, does anyone who voted for it, and everybody voted for it, can make a motion for
Okay.
reconsideration? Need a second?
Second.
Vote.
Okay, so you're going to go back and,
Sure.
okay.
Yep.
All those in favor of the reconsidered survey, say aye. All right, okay, thank you. Now, back to 2. Tuition assistance.
We'll get away from the consent.
That's okay, okay, good.
Yeah, I'm definitely a proponent of continuing education. I'm pursuing my MBA right now. I know Ken is as well at UNCW, and I think that's important, and definitely certainly understand offering some assistance to our workforce to kind of have them move up the line here internally. We've got a lot of talks coming about austerity measures, and this is basically a 300% increase on what we're offering, and we're offering it up front, not after the course has been completed. That worries me a little bit, more than the amount, the offering of $5,000 tuition assistance up front. So I just thought that was warrant some discussion as we move into these budget conversations and cutting expenses where we can.
So I'd share that the change to the program parameters doesn't change the funding. That would be considered as part of the budget. And you point out a very important component of this. Later on in your agenda is a proposal for a position to manage this. So I would say that for a program as ambitious as the tuition reimbursement program is structured, which is very similar to Union County, that we would need somebody to be able to monitor that closely. The upfront component is because we believe that we have a number of frontline employees that would benefit from going back to get an associate's degree. But their financial situation, which this board is slowly working to address, we've received feedback that it may be a financial burden for them to upfront funding to go back to school on their own time. So we're proposing a modification for your consideration, that's all.
Well, I think continuing education, at least for me, currently involved in it right now, and in my undergrad was a bit of a sacrifice. And I had to figure out how to fund it myself. Knowing there was a light at the end of the tunnel, which I didn't have, but knowing that there is a light at the tunnel that we're willing to reimburse after the course has been taken should be sufficient in my mind. I think it lessens certainly lessens the financial blow at the end, but it also gives some incentive to continue the program rather than shelling out a bunch of cash that we potentially may have to claw back if someone was to get their education and then immediately take a job elsewhere. It's worth considering. I realize it's probably not the most popular idea, but again, through the lens of austerity measures that we're going to be discussing, I think it's important to every single dollar that we can look at, keeping in the authority going to what we do at our core service is important.
And points well taken. From our staff review, we recognize the risk, including the risk that we will have to try to recover funds from folks that either fail or leave in a period of time less than what is envisioned by the policy. The policy envisions that if you get a master's degree or get an associate's degree or BS or BA, and you leave before the time frame within the policy, you have to prorate pay it back. This is kind of the structure, not kind of, it's exactly the structure that is seen in Charlotte Water and in Union County, and it involves risks. From a staff perspective, we recognize that risk, and we propose your consideration of it.
Ken, what's the projection on how much money this would cost us?
Well, it will be part of your larger budget process, but you currently dedicate $25,000, if I recall correctly, to tuition reimbursement at a smaller level. We're suggesting that you increase that level and allow staff to upfront it to some staff, to folks that have a need.
What's that level? Is that 300% of 25,000?
It's, I believe it's 1,200.
1,500.
So we're taking it from 1,500 to 5,000.
5,000, which in theory would pay for 2 semesters at UNC Wilmington. The concept is we'll have a manager managing this, and that we will be looking at a number of opportunities. If it were, and let me also say that inside the budget, we're proposing to increase the tuition reimbursement program from $25,000 to $100,000. In theory, it could help 20 folks go back to college. In reality, it'll probably be a larger number going back to get associate's degrees or to get certifications or licensure.
Forgive me, I'm Chair. What is the cost of the additional manager that we're going to have looking over this program? I know it was reflected in the budget.
So that is part of the discussion of human resources in the Human Resources Committee report. We're going to table that. I didn't mention this to you earlier, but at the request of the commissioners, since they're going to be out of the discussion, we're going to table that discussion until the next board meeting.
Okay, well, I think that discussion is germane to this one, so could we table
Do you want to table
item
this one as
2?
well?
I make a motion to table.
Okay, make a motion to table item number 2.
Just a quick comment on that, and think we possibly need to separate the amount of the increase from the timing of the reimbursement. If we're going to be reimbursing an employee for their tuition, then I think it would be much more of an incentive for them to go back to school if we reimburse them much closer to the time that they spend the money, rather than waiting until the end of the semester.
And that's what's proposed in this policy.
I
Yeah.
understand that,
Yeah.
but what you were saying was to, you know, that it is a burden, but that it wasn't unreasonable to wait. And I'm thinking if we're gonna reimburse them, it's not costing us any more money to reimburse them as they have the expense, rather than waiting and putting on them, a burden on them for 3 to 6 months.
Could I make one more request? When we do talk about this, I'd like to know the difference between the people that are just going back to get degrees versus licensure. Because to me, those are different triage questions. If someone's licensure germane to getting a promotion versus getting a college degree for the sake of getting a college degree.
Right. And we certainly can bring that data forward.
Okay.
For licensure that's required for a role, we incorporate that
That's
into
already,
a separate
okay.
fund, and they actually have opportunities during work periods to prepare for that.
Okay,
What this would do would be prepare people for licensures that will be value added to the organization, but is not a minimum requirement of the role.
One more follow-up for the discussion when we do have it again. I'd like to know, if we look at the Charlotte Authority, how much of those funds, when they, you know, if somebody does move on to a different organization after they've had their tuition covered, how often is that actually repaid? If we can obtain that data, I think that'd be helpful.
We'll make every effort.
A motion to table.
Okay, table the item.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're gonna have discussion. Thank you all, that's the consent agenda. No discussion. Moving on to new business, administrative report, the attorney's report,
I don't have anything this morning.
no closed session.
No closed session.
Ken, executive.
I present to you the key indicators, safety report, environmental report, strategic plan. Are there any questions? Then I would add 2 items. One, this Saturday, we will be participating for the first time as an organization in the Azalea Festival. In the parade, I would like to make a personal invitation to any board member who would like to walk with us. See Vaughn, if you have an interest, we would love to have you. Understand if you have other commitments. The other item I'd like to share is at the end of this month, I and Nicolette Fulton will be traveling to Washington. You may recall that one of our strategies to address budgetary constraints is a lobbying campaign for special appropriations. So we're just following through on that. You will probably see us traveling more, both to Raleigh and to Washington, as we continue to pursue those alternatives. That's it.
Ken, will Wayne Drop be making an appearance at the parade?
Yes, sir.
Super. Good luck, Vaughn.
It's not fun.
Oh, I got the easy one.
All right, moving on to committee reports. So the executive committee met last week. Those minutes are in your packet for review. No action items there. Moving on to long-range planning.
Yes, long-range planning met on March 23rd. Those minutes are in your packet. There are also 2 presentations that were made to us on lead and copper rule revisions and the Northern New Hanover County water and sewer projects update. Those are also in your packet, and encourage y'all to look those over.
Questions for long-range planning? Moving on to finance committee, Mr. Morris.
Yes, minutes from our April 5th meeting are in your packet. And I'll ask our CFO, John McLean, to present the monthly financials. John?
Thank you. Just very briefly through this. This is a look through February, the end of February. You see the operating side of the house and the operating side of the house on the left and the capital side of the house on the right in terms of revenues versus expenditures. On the operating side, you can see that revenues have exceeded expenditures by $5.8 million through the end of February. On the capital side, expenditures have exceeded revenues during the year by about $12.6 million. Again, that's due to the expenditure of bond proceeds on the GAC project as that finishes up. In terms of our fund balance and the various assignments, we have a total fund balance of about $91.4 million, and the various assignments and commitments and restrictions are detailed below that, with an unassigned fund balance of $54.3 million. Are there any questions on this? Thank you. Next one.
Before you start the next one, we need a motion to approve Commissioner Zappel, or excuse.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
So this is a revised, summarized and shortened presentation from what was presented at Finance Committee last week. I'm not even really going to go through this. I may go through some of the slides, but what I really wanted to do was just kind of have a brief kickoff discussion that kind of paints the landscape of what we're looking at. And I think the most important thing to understand with this budget is the magnitude of Southside and that project. So over the last 10 years, our annual debt service has run around $25 million a year. Up in some years, down in others, but around $25 million. When the debt service on Southside kicks in, we're looking at annual debt service of $43 million. That's a 70% increase, over 70% increase. So, you know, if we try to swallow that pill in a single year, we're looking at a 24 to 30% one-time increase to the average bill in a single year, which that's certainly an option. And in our models, you know, we're looking at that being in FY26. Okay, so not this next year, not the next year, but the year after that. So there is a way around that, and the answer is to break that pill into smaller pieces. And when we do that, that large increase obviously goes away, and some other good things happen too. So the increases that we would do, they would be in excess of the retail revenue requirement. That extra money, that extra cash, will be tucked away in a capital reserve, okay, which allows us to cash flow the Southside project and delay the issuance of the debt. Okay, so instead of that debt service kicking in FY26, you're looking at FY27, 28, something like that. Okay, that extends this, you know, kind of smoothing period, which results in smaller rate increases. Okay. And the other thing too is that we're issuing less debt. That means that rates are lower in the long term compared to if we don't do this smoothing, because we're saving on interest. Okay, and I have a slide that kind of shows you that. That's a look at our debt service over the last 10 years and what we're projecting in FY26. You can see that spike there. So what this shows is, let's look at this just in time. So this is like the all-in 1 year method. So here are rates now, FY23. The average bill is $69.19, something like that. What this just in time, it's not a true just in time, because what this factors in is a second 8.5. If you recall, last year, we had under a just-in-time approach, a 13.2% increase that we decided to break out over 2 years. We did an 8.5 for FY23. There was another 8.5, you know, planned in FY24. Obviously, every year we we only decide on the budget and rates for our single year. But this just-in-time bakes in that second 8.5. You're looking at rates staying where they are for FY25, and then this is a 24% jump, okay, because the debt service for Southside kicks in FY26. Under the rate smoothing approach, we're gradually taking up rates, and this is a smooth slope, okay, over 5 years, and we're able to do it over 5 years because we're building up capital reserve money in FY24, FY25, FY26, FY27, so we can cash flow the Southside project, delay that debt issuance, and so the debt service actually kicks in here, okay? And then you can see this little gap where the orange line is above the blue line. That gap is there because we issue less debt service is less, we're saving on interest, and that's what that gap reflects right there. So that's just kind of a graphical, visual model to kind of show you what I'm talking about.
John, how long will those rates stay up there at that rate? I mean, will that be from then on?
Right, so we only do a 10-year projection. Once you get past 10 years, but yes, I mean, we are going to exist for longer than this 10-year period. One thing that is, I mean, that this gap certainly, yes, would exist and extend out after 2033. Another big thing that's kind of coming up is the debt service on our debt that's currently outstanding. We're going to see a big dip in about I think it's 2034 or 2035. So what you would see if I were to extend this out is both of these lines would kind of dip down to maybe about this level, but that gap would still exist between the orange and the blue.
That us paying off debt and that debt.
That's right. So we have our debt on our 2016, which was a refunding of our 2008 bond issue, is going away. Yeah.
There's no refinancing possibilities or taking advantage of?
Not really at this time. Not at this time.
But what you're saying is in order for those lines to come down at all, we have to have huge chunks come off the debt service at some point.
That's right.
Some future point in time.
That's right. And that would exist under either scenario
Yeah.
here. So that gap would remain, but you'd see both lines come down if this were to be extended out.
What's the total cost of Southside?
Total cost of Southside is estimated to be $250 million.
Looking back, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
In looking back, because Southside's been an item on this table for years, but looking back, would we have been better served ourselves by not deferring that to this point? I know it's not going to do a damn bit of good, but I'm just kind of curious, because we all jumped on that. If we were able to defer it to now, and the price has doubled.
May I give a thought on that?
Sure.
And I can say that it's generally a good practice to defer capital projects. That is something that they teach us in both our financing aspects and our management aspects to maximize the useful life of the infrastructure that you have today. So that's generally a good practice.
And we did that. We made improvements over there that prolonged the useful life of Southside. We did that.
The unfortunate economic reality is this organization had two unforeseen outside impacts on it. One was PFAS. So that pulled away from your ability to manage this project. And the other is we had, as a nation, this record economic inflation period, which was unforeseeable in 2018 or 2013 when these decisions were made. You can only make a decision based on what's in front of you today and do your best to forecast it. In business, we call that water over the dam and under the bridge.
So I know this might be a shot in the dark. I just want to state this. So the money that we possibly could get from Comores, would that lessen those gaps, or would that help the consumer any at all? Because they're watching that. And as an organization, as much as we talk about getting a settlement from Comores, can that help in the long run as far as reducing some of these rate increases?
Sure. Yeah, so this concept of smoothing, I mean, is something that's, I mean, it's really the only other alternative to this one time, right? So we're talking about smoothing rates over some period of time. Under our current landscape, that optimized period is 5 years, okay? With something like that, getting, let's say, $100 million from a PFAS settlement, that would conceivably, if we decided to do that, we could put that money towards Southside, and that would extend the period that we had to issue the debt. It would delay the debt service on Southside even more, and it would reduce the debt that we have to issue for Southside. So, I mean, what that would do potentially is, you're instead of timing, debt service up here or up here, that debt service is going to be something less, and you'd be able to smooth it out longer. So you're looking at, and we just kind of bear with me, you're looking at a line that would do something like this. It would go from here to something less, and it maybe, delay it out to 2030, 2031, something like that. So, yes. Yeah, there are other things as well. We are currently applying for state revolving loans. If we're successful in that, that will be another source of funding for the project that will allow us to delay the issuance of revenue bonds to fill the remaining project need. Ken mentioned that him and Nicolette are going to be going up to Washington in efforts to procure grant funding. So that's something that we're doing on both the federal and state fronts. But in terms of this modeling now, we're not factoring any of those things as a matter of being conservative based on the best information that we have today. So if one of those things were to happen, great news, and we would have a different conversation. Certainly, it would completely change this landscape.
So one more thing. So the South Side, do we have any good, strong development that's coming to South Side that could help us offset some of this cost? Like, of course, with the North Side, there are a lot going on the North Side, even like that Sidbury Road development. Do we have anything strong, concrete, that's happening on the South Side that we can depend on as far as developers?
Well, at a very high level, I would remind our board that we have, to a certain extent, the ability to move flows between our two plants. And we actually need to move flows that were shifted from south side to north side a number of years ago back to south side to make room for that growth in the northeastern part of the county. Growth is a positive impactor towards addressing this issue. The more customers we add, and we don't spend money in terms of extending water and sewer lines, for example, that spreads out the cost. A lot of that is already baked into this model. There are some tools that we're giving you to consider. We're not suggesting any changes. One of the tools we're giving you is a possible change in the system development charges. That would certainly adjust this line. Another tool we're giving you is possible changes in wholesale rates. That would minutely adjust this line. A third tool that we're giving you is we're going to have conversations about austerity measures. Keep in mind that our proposals for rate increases this year are tied very closely to operations and maintenance and capital. The O&M increase that we're suggesting this year is 5.6%. That's less than the 6% CPI we measured against, which was less than CPI last year. So we're working real hard as your staff not to propose anything above the market drivers. The salary and benefits this year, we're suggesting something at 7.5%, which is above the market driver. That 1.5% is tied directly to trying to create that living wage adjustment. So that is all rolling into the lower levels of our organization, so to speak. But if we didn't do that, then we'd be right at CPI. It's not to say that there isn't room to be more efficient, more effective, and we're going to have those conversations. But we'll have to cut the equivalent of $5 million from your budget. And that's $5 million for the entire time frame.
For the entire what?
For the entire time frame here. So it's $5 million this year, and that carries through the next 4 years to adjust that slope by only 1%. On the capital side, it's even harder. It's even a heavier lift. We have to cut $20 million. It's a 1 to 20 reduction for a 1% net slope. The slope truly is driven by the fact that you're building a generational project, and that we, for good business reasons, we had 8 years of limited rate increases, so we didn't have a very large amount of money in the bank to fall back on. There were good business reasons to make that decision, but this is a natural consequence of that.
Ken, did we apply for money under the bipartisan infrastructure law?
Yes, sir.
We just didn't get it.
We are actively seeking any of the funding that is available through the DIL. Just as we actively sought ARPA funding, and we got very lucky, and I think we were really helped out by our local delegations, a better way to say that. Our local delegation stepped forward and offered essentially $53 million over the last year and a half. That's directly or indirectly benefited CFPUA. We're asking for another 22 to 25 from the state delegation this year. So your staff is moving to go to Washington and start a very long and uncertain process. I want to manage expectations. Long and uncertain, to seek funding directly from Washington, which has happened in the last 2 years. Special appropriations are a thing now. So that would drop the line. And of course, if we have a victory in our court case with Chemours, that will definitely drop the line. You really only have to make one decision this year, though. What is this year? And we suggest that you do things this year and try to set yourself up for easier decisions in the following years.
Go ahead. A comment. It seems like regardless of all the opportunities we may have of getting additional or lower cost funds in the future, that pursuing rate smoothing starting this year is going to lower that line and delay rate increases, regardless of how much money we do or don't get down the line.
That's correct. That's correct. And so that's why this is such a big topic this year. Because, right, part of the budget recommendation is going to be, or could potentially be, based on the board's appetite for avoiding a 25 to 30% increase in the next 2 years, 3 years. And so I think that's as we kind of work towards a consensus for this budget, that's going to be decision point number one, is if we need to start taking rates up now in order to avoid a large spike, the next 2 to 3 years. So
Better enjoy that parade this year.
yeah.
I wouldn't want to march in it next year.
What kind of increases to SDCs, and I'm not a proponent of increasing SDCs, what kind of increases are you going to be proposing?
So that will be part of our further discussions. I will share, and we are going to be publishing our rate consultants analysis for the SDCs on our website. We got to publish that out there for public comment for 45 days. It's a state requirement. But that analysis indicates that the maximum single ERU combined SDC that we could charge is somewhere around $7,800.
$7,800.
And it's around, I think it's $4,390 combined today. If the board were to adopt that maximum SDC for this next year's budget, that would drop that 6% over 5 years to something closer to 5% over 5 years. Now, the board has the flexibility to leave SDCs where they are, cut SDCs, or do anything, between where they are today and what that maximum is. So total flexibility. So that'll just be one of those levers that we talk about, how we're going to approach the SDCs in the context of this whole South Side thing. So,
How do you determine how it's gonna drop at a percent? That's from your growth projections?
So growth is one piece. What I did in the model is I just kind of plugged in, if I look at, cutting $1 million in operating revenues or increasing $1 million in non-retail revenues in the base year in the model, what that does. And for every $1 million non-retail rate revenues increase, operating expenditure decrease, you're looking at a 0.2% decrease in that 6%. So, you're looking at another, over $4 million in SDC revenue if the board were to adopt that maximum.
You don't plug in. You're looking at how to handle CFPUA. You're not looking at affordability of housing across the board. That's outside of your job description.
Well, I think it depends on how the board sees their role. Is it really CFPUA centric, or is there some broader fiduciary responsibility to the entire community, not just water and sewer, but the impacts on housing? So.
And I've heard from your peers on how important it is that your leadership staff be plugged into the affordability issue, because it's important. I would share that at the recent Realtors and Home Builders economic forecast, we learned that the average home sale price had approached $415,000. We're effectively a little under 1%, and the increase that we propose, if we propose one, so the maximum that you can consider, right now staff is not taking a position on this, would place it a little under 2%. We realize every percent has an impact on affordability, but that is a relatively small impact in the scheme of things.
So from an accounting standpoint, we need more dollars. We either take it from SDCs or we put it in monthly billing. Is that one way to think about it?
That's the two ends of the scale, right? SDCs, retail rates.
And that, if we put it in SDCs, it gets spread out over 30 years, sort of, if we're talking about new construction. Is that one way to think about it?
Could think about it that way.
And when we talk about housing affordability, we, of course, we're thinking about new home or, house prices for buyers. But I think a significant chunk of our community, if we're going to talk about, being actors in the community, our renters are people that we need to worry about too, right? Those are going to be the folks that are pressed most financially if we put these new charges in rates. Is that an accurate statement?
I think maybe another way to say it is, the impact of SDCs is maybe focused on a narrower subset of the community than retail rates. I think that's a fair statement.
That's fair.
Thank you.
There's SDCs imposed on commercial projects and multifamily projects, right? And at the end of the day, that goes to the consumer as well. So
Yeah.
certainly to your new home buyer is going to see it as a line item, but I believe it will increase, cost to businesses, commercial projects, multifamily projects across the board. So that's important to consider when we're.
Everybody's affected by it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is probably the most important project we've discussed since I've been on this board. And whatever it takes, we've got to do it. And I'd much prefer to do it in small bites and get to where we need to get, and save good luck in Washington and Raleigh and wherever we can cut, save without diluting our service to our customers. Got to do it. I mean, you can't kick it down the road any further.
I got a comment to piggyback on that. I guess it's kind of my budget notes of it, and I've said it a few times, but it's austerity measures. And I think we need to see a budget that has all these superfluous programs and projects and ideas that are nice to have, but not necessary to the core function of CFPUA, removed from this next budget. I think we need to see that. I mean, certainly there are increased costs that we're going to have, and the reality is that that's going to increase rates, no doubt about it. But the ratepayer, we owe it to the ratepayer to take off everything that's not addressing the core function of this authority in this upcoming budget. And I'm going to continue advocating that as we move through the budget process. We're just prepping everybody.
So good segue. So I think over the next month, we have some one-off budget discussions, and then we have a board, after the May board meeting, we have a budget workshop.
Correct.
So we can be ready.
In-
Review your packets and have your thing.
We'll take that information in for the definition of non-operational activities. We'll need some guidance, because a lot of what we do is tied to your strategic plan. It's your strategic plan. So we will try to get that collective feedback and try to accumulate that in a way that we can reflect it back to you.
All right, thanks. Anything else for finance, Bill?
Nothing else for finance.
All right.
Ms. Gordon?
Do we need to excuse you?
Not yet.
Okay, sorry. Aren't you leaving?
Yes.
You
want me to go?
know, the Communications Committee, in the absence of Commissioner Barfield, the minutes are in your packet. I believe it's just additional items, communications. Okay. All right. Moving on to Human Resources Committee. And so we would like to defer item number 2 to the May discussion as well.
We need a motion.
Yeah, a motion, since both commissioners requested to be a part of that discussion. So can we move to do that?
I was move that, make the motion.
Yeah,
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Mr. Briggs?
Okay, when I came in, Lori was talking about the, I'm sorry, I'll start off. The HR committee met on March 28, 2023. When I came in, Lori was talking about the drug screening process that we are adopting. So the committee approved recommendation to change the random drug screening process to include all employees instead of previously identified safety-sensitive positions. The next item has been moved. Also, staff presented a compensation recommendation for FY 2024 that includes a 3% market adjustment and 3% merit adjustment for employees. And this is incorporated into the operating budget for consideration. The next item has been moved, and the next item that I'm going to present is the committee approved a change of holiday pay and overtime compensation. The change allows for hours worked on an approved designated holiday to be paid at the overtime rate regardless of the number of hours worked during a work week. Funding was approved through the Finance Committee Is there any discussions on that?
So we need a motion to approve item number 3, which is an update to the overtime compensation and holiday pay.
Right.
Okay. So I'll take a motion.
I'll move.
All right, and a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. So that wraps up the human resources report.
Thank you, Mr. Briggs. Moving on to the consolidation study update.
The consolidation study effort has been outwardly stalled and paused for the month, not stalled by any means, paused while the consultant finish complete the rate study. And so we will be picking back up on those efforts on the 26th with the committee meeting, and then moving ahead pretty quickly after that, I guess, to wrap up the study. So it was paused for a little over 30 days to allow those financial performance to be prepared. So other than that, nothing really to report at this meeting.
All right. Any additional old business? All right, any other questions, closing comments? All right, thank you all. Have a good April. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.